Our first stop in this demonstration is to go and take a look at the web page for the Home for the Holidays No.2 project at designandmake.com. When you actually purchase this project, you'll receive with it 8 individual models that can be machined individually or can be used to make your own layout. You'll receive an assembled layout, something we've already created for you that we felt would be useful. You'll receive a project sheet with lots of inspiration on what you can do with the models inside this project. And then also you'll receive a special edition project sheet, which will tell you how to size the trivet, either the round or the square, to create the proper socket size to accept the size candle that you'd like to have it. We'll go over this a little bit later on. Now when you download and install this, of course, your models will show up in your clip art tab in your Vectric software, but also it will install in the default clip art library your 2 project sheets. And the default clip art library and the install directory for Home for the Holidays No.2 looks a lot like this. You'll have all of the individual models, the assembled layout, and then the 2 project sheets. Now, if you can't find that folder and you find it hard to navigate to it, then what we suggest you do is to go back to the project page, right-click on the project sheet and say Save Image As, and save that someplace that's convenient for you, either your My Documents folder or somewhere special where you keep these. For this demonstration, we'll be using VCarve Desktop. It's important to remember that all the tools that we're going to be using in VCarve Desktop are also available in VCarve Pro and Aspire. So let's start off by creating a brand new project. And first thing we need to set up is our job size. Now, because we don't know how big our base of our candle holder is yet, then this is going to be hard to determine. So we're going to go ahead and flip back to our project page at designandmake.com, and we're going to take a look at the actual sizing chart for this project. So there's lots of great information on here. First of all, if you know the socket size that you want, or the diameter of the base of your candle, then you can refer to this area to figure out what the diameter or the size of your round or square base needs to be. There's some information here in case you forget what I say on what to do. It's important that you follow good candle safety. So if you have access to an LED candle, those are a great option, so you're not burning a candle. But if you happen to not, then follow common sense directions or common sense on how to use your candles safely. Now, an important note: if you're going to use a tapered candle, most of them only have a 3/4 inch base. So that means the trivet would only be 1.6 inches in diameter, which is pretty teeny. So what you're going to want to do is make sure that it's weighted. So you add either the significance shape height to it or a significant base height added to your model so that it's not too tippy. So in this case, we're going to create our candle holder to fit a 3-inch candle, and we're going to use the round one. So we need to make the diameter of our round base 6.4 inches. So in that case, we could probably get away with a 7 or 8 inch job space. So let's go back to VCarve, and we're going to make this 7.5 inches and 7.5 inches. Oops. Now, our material thickness, we're going to go with 3/4 an inch right now, but that may change later on depending on what how tall our candle holder gets and how safe we think it needs to be, like how high it needs to be safe. We're going to start, our start position is going to be in the center. We're going to use inches, and we're going to use a very high resolution, and we're going to click OK. Now we're going to go over to our clip art tab, and because I already have the Home for the Holidays No.2 download and installed, then I can just find it, and there it is. And there are all of the models, the assembled layout, and all the individual models. So let's double click on the round trivet, and that should bring it right straight into the center. And we're going to press T on the keyboard. That's transform. So we can set the size of this. So let's set this to be 6.4 inches. And because we have the link X and Y together, then it's going to change those, the X and the Y together. And we're going to hit apply and close. And we're going to look at this in 3D. So there we have. So a couple things to notice about this right now is, first of all, it's quite squished. the shape height isn't very high, and this wouldn't be very safe to put a candle in right now, although it is a pillar candle, so it would be pretty stable. And also that there's an edge in here. And so I'm going to show you a little bit later how to actually cap that so that there's no hole in the center. We found that some customers would rather there not be a hole in the center of that, so we'll show you how to do that. So now what we're going to do is we are going to change the shape height of this to get something that we think is going to be safe to hold a candle. Let's go over to our modeling tab, and we are going to go to our component properties. And because we already had the trivet selected, then it pops right up. If not, then what you'll need to do is either double click on it in the 2D view, double click on it in the 3D view, or go ahead and select it in your component tree. So there we have it, and we're going to change this to be the shape height to be probably somewhere around 0.625. Let's see what that looks like. It looks pretty good. And we're going to add a base height of that to it to be 0.125. Now, these numbers are important for a reason. Normally, I would do this very organically, but I know that in the end, I would like to have this sort of fit inside of a 3/4 inch to a 1/2 inch piece of wood. So let's kind of hope that those numbers work out for us great in the end. And let's close that down. Great. That looks pretty good. So let's look at this straight down. Let's go ahead and fill in the hole in the center like I suggested we would do. So luckily, with your install of VCarve Desktop, VCarve Pro, or Aspire, you get lots of free clip art. If you don't have this installed right now, then all you need to do is log into the portal, your portal account. It's under Help, and visit the user portal. And when you log in, you'll be given access to all of the free clip art that should come along with your Vectric software. But right now we're going to go to Domes and Dishes, and we're going to bring in this flat round dish. And we bring it in, you'll see that it automatically gets merged into our project, and it fills in that hole for us. So that's pretty good, right, the way it is. Now, if we're not quite happy with the shape height of that, then we can go ahead and go back to our modeling tab and click our spanner and figure out dynamically what this should be to fit in there. So kind of what you're doing is you're just kind of shaping it to get close to filling in that hole without having that rim showing. And somewhere around there is probably great. For now, let's close that down. Now we're going to create a brand new level. We're going to insert a level, and we're going to call this Decorations. And on this level is where we're going to put all of our ribbons and our holly that's going to go on this actual trivet. For now, we're going to go back to our clip art tab. We're going to go down to our design and make folder, back down to our Home for the Holidays #2 project, and we're going to bring in our ribbon. So you'll see that the red ribbon segment that we have shows up right in the middle of our job site, which is perfect, except for we need to go ahead and rotate these around where they need to be. So the first thing we're going to do when we flip the 2D view, we're going to need to hit F on the keyboard, and that will center everything. And then our bitmap representations of our models is a little bit out of order. So we're going to select this model here, which is the dish or the dome. Right click on it, and we're going to say move this bitmap to the back. So now we can actually see our trivet in the center. And that'll be very helpful in a second. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select our ribbon, holding down our shift key, we're going to drag it down to somewheres on top of the recess in that trivet. And then holding down our shift key again, we're actually going to size it down. And this is all very kind of hit and miss. Again, holding down the shift key, we're going to drag it into place. And what I'm looking for is a nice consistent gap in here, and then also the distance between here and there is similar to this gap. So that's pretty close. We can use our cursor keys to nudge it in and out, or we can zoom in if we'd like. I think what I want to do is actually make it just a little bit smaller, like that. And that seems pretty good. That's good. Now let's go ahead and flip over to our 3D view for a second. Now, on our modeling tab, you'll notice that our new level that we created is an add level. So anything that's on this level will be added to this to our bottom level, which happens to be our trivet. So that works out pretty nice because that makes sure that our ribbon actually follows the contour of that. So let's go ahead and size up this ribbon. Let's change the shape height. Now instead of going over and using our spanner, we're going to click on a little blue floating properties dialog here at the bottom. So if you click this little handle, then up will pop your floating properties dialog. And we can do some of the same modifications that we have over here inside this floating properties dialog. So we're going to go ahead and change this to, let's say 0.25, let's say a 1/4 inch, the shape height of that. And that's a bit much, I think. I'd like for it to kind of flow a bit better maybe. So let's just go ahead and change this to 0.2. We'll see what that does for us. Oh, and that's looking a little bit better. And actually, I might make it a little bit less than that, 0.18 maybe. There we go. That's perfect, I think. Let's close that down and look straight down again on that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to copy this ribbon from bottom to top. So to do that, we have a couple different methods, but my choice method is to hold down my Shift key, hold down my Control key, and then press H on the keyboard. So H on the key, or V on the keyboard, excuse me. V on the keyboard means flip vertically. Shift means across the center line. And the Control key, when you hold that down, that means make a copy. So if I do all that at the same time, so Shift, Control, V, it will go ahead and copy that from bottom to top for me. So now you'll see over here in my component tree, I now have 2 ribbons showing up, which actually is exactly what I wanted. So now we want to go ahead and build the holly to put on the sides of this. So let's go back to our clip art tab, and we're going to bring in the holly sprig. And now this gets a little bit confusing. So we're going to go back to our modeling tab just for a second, and we're going to turn off the level 1. So that way we can see things a bit better. And then let's go back to our clip art tab and bring in the holly leaf. Now we're going to go ahead and, using a combination of our cursor keys and sliding things around here, we're going to go ahead and build us a sprig of holly that looks right. I'm going to shift select both of those, hold down my Shift key, and slide those down, make them a little bit smaller. There we have it. Now I'm going to select this holly leaf, and I'm going to press H on the keyboard, which is going to flip it horizontally. And then I'm going to move it into place by clicking it one more time and using the center of it to move it where it belongs. I'm going to rotate it around, and then visually what I want to do is I want to make this leaf approximately the same size as this leaf. So let's just go ahead and size it up just so it's approximately right. Nature isn't perfect. That looks pretty good. Let's have a look at this from the side, and we want to see whether or not our shape heights look good or not. This needs to be a bit thicker, I think, and then needs to be tapered down into our berries. So let's just go ahead and take a peek at this, and that's 0.1423 is the actual shape height of this. Again, using the floating properties dialog by clicking the solid blue dot here. We'll go ahead and we'll click on the holly. Now as soon as I do that, this gets updated. Our floating properties get updated for this this component we have selected. So it's 0.19. So sorry, what we're going to look at is the shape height. So the shape height of this is 0.19, and we're going to go ahead and make this 0.19 as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just, when you look at this side on, you'll see that this kind of tapers in and this one doesn't taper in. So we're going to go ahead and use the fade feature, and we're going to click fade, and we're going to set our 2 anchor points, 1 anchor point here and 1 anchor point there, and we're going to fade it by about, let's say 35% in there, and that'll kind of make it look just about the same. Well, maybe a little bit more. Let's make it 40%, and we're going to hit close. Now I'm pretty happy with that for the time being. So what we're going to do now is I want to see if it's at the right arc to fit inside of that trivet. So we're going to hold down the Shift key and select both of those. Hold down the Shift key again while I click again, and I'm going to be able to rotate this. And when seeing as I have the Shift key held down while I rotate it, it's going to incrementally rotate it, which is what I want. I know that's way too big, so we're going to hold down the Shift key again, and we're going to size it, and we're going to slide it over here approximately where it belongs before I turn back on my level with the holder on it, the candle holder. And I did a fairly good job, actually. That was all by fluke. And we're going to rotate that and use the cursor keys to nudge it into place. And that looks great. Now to kind of make things a little cleaner, I'm going to go over here, and seeing as I have both of these selected in my component tree, I can right click on that and I can say group those together. So now they become one lump, but they still are individual models, but VCarve Pro will treat them as one lump. And let's just go ahead and get the floating properties up for that. And we're going to change this to be 0.2, which is the same shape height as what these ribbons are. We'll close that down and let's have a look. So that looks pretty nice. I am going to make one little change though. I see that there's not a whole lot of definition between the dish here and also the edge of my holly. So let's just go ahead and look straight down on that again. We're going to select the floating properties dialog, and what we're going to do is we're going to make this 1/8, and we're going to make this point, the base height, 0.01. And what that will do is it will give us a bit more of a base height to kind of pull that off of the bottom of that dish, and it did exactly what I wanted to do. So that's great. Now let's go ahead and copy that across our model. So holding down the Shift, Control, and not V this time, but H, it will copy it horizontally across our layout, and there we have it. And that looks pretty good, exactly what I expected to see. Now let's go ahead and lay out our vectors to put on some V-carving text on here. Let's go back to our 2D view. We're going to press F on the keyboard, and that will focus in on our whole job space. Go over to our Drawing tab, and we're going to draw a circle right in the center. And we're going to lay this out so that it ends up being there's enough room here at the bottom of it. And because I started in the center, and I'm going to show you that again, just to make that a little more clear. I'm going to grab the circle, and you'll notice that as soon as I get close to the center, my pointer snaps to 0, 0. And if I start to draw by holding down my left mouse button and pull out, it's drawing from the center of my job space, which is kind of nice. I'm just pulling out to the point where I think it's a good size for where I want my text to lay on to fit inside my ribbon. And I think somewhere around there is probably pretty good. The space between the bottom of my ribbon and the line is pretty nice, and I'll balance it out by leaving the same amount of gap at the top. So we're going to go ahead and apply that. We're going to close it, and there we have it. Now what we need to do is we need to actually crop this off so that we end up only having a segment to lay our text on. And the easiest way to do that is to draw a line from the center. Again, it will snap to the center, out to where I would like to have it cropped off on one side. I'm going to overshoot that out here a little bit, and I'll show you why in a second. Then we're going to press Escape, and then I want to hold down my Control, Shift, and H again, and that's going to pop a copy of that over to the other side of my project. So I only want to keep this center section. And why I overshot that circle was so that I could use this tool right here, the Interactive Trim tool. If I click that, I just need to trim anything outside of where this vector crosses or intersects with that circle. If I snip there, then all that goes away, and I can hit Close. And then I can go ahead and delete these because I don't need these anymore. And there we have a nice line for us to put our text on. Now we're going to do the same thing we did a second ago with copying it horizontally across our center line. But I want to point something out to you again. If you select that and you go into node mode by pressing N on your keyboard, you'll notice that there's a green end and a black end. The green end is the start point. If I flip this horizontally, then my start point is going to be on the opposite end that I like my text to flow. I would like to have my text over here flow from this side to that side. And so when I do flip it, I need to make sure that I flip it again vertically to move that start point to the other side. We go back to our pick tool. We're going to hold down Control, Shift, and V. Should copy that. Oh, I don't have it selected. Control, Shift, and V. That'll copy it up. And then what I want to do is press H again. That's going to flip it horizontally. And when I go into node mode, you'll see that now my start point is over here. Okay. Let's go ahead and type in some text. So we're going to type in family. So we'll start with friends. And we're going to choose a font. And we're going to use a font that I know and I really kind of like, this PupCat font. We're going to make it bold, and we're going to make sure that we change this from text height from 10 inches to be, let's just say 1 inch for now, and we'll hit apply. That's great. Let's close that down. Then we're going to go ahead and just select that and use our cursor keys, and we're just going to bring it down to just above the line. It doesn't need to be there, but this just kind of helps me when I size it, holding down the shift key and using the control handle here. I can size it down to be approximately the size that I want it to be. Doesn't need to be exact, but that's pretty good. The gap at the bottom is pretty similar to the gap at the top. And to make my life a little easier, I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to drag this up, and I'm going to make a copy of that. And so that way I can go ahead and edit this text to be family. And everything else is the same, so I know that I have a consistent font size going on here. Now let's go ahead and put this font on this line. So selecting the friends text, holding down the shift key and selecting this line, and then going ahead and clicking on the wrap text along a curve. We're just going to hit at the bottom apply to start with. And we're going to say OK. We're going to go with whatever it says. We're going to maintain text size if we can. Click OK. It's not going to let me, so we need to scale this down then by using this slider to fit on that line. That looks pretty good. So we're going to remember 41% in our head, and we're going to leave that all the same because we're going to change the, if you want to just play around with these a bit, you can kind of tell what's going on here. There we go. That's a bit better. Playing around with these different settings will get your text kind of sized appropriately for what you'd like. If your text happens to end on the other side of your line, you just need to click text on the other side, and that's great. And we're going to hit apply and close. Now we need to go and fix the spacing between the letters, and we're going to go ahead and use the edit text spacing and curves. So we need to unselect that and then select the friends text and go ahead and change the text spacing. So with this tool selected, if I hover between my letters, you'll see that I can change the spacing between my letters. If I click without holding down my shift key, it brings my letters closer together. If I hold down the shift key, I can actually move those away from each other, whatever gap I think is good. So we're just going to go ahead and click until we get our spacing right. And depending on the font that you choose, you may or may not have to do this, but it's always good to know how to do it in case you need to. And I think that's pretty good, at least from my eyes. That looks great. Wonderful. Let's go back to our pick tool. Now let's go ahead and zoom out. And we're going to put family on the line at the top. So let's grab this, grab it again, and pull it to the top. And then we're going to zoom in. I'm zooming in using my scroll wheel on my mouse. So holding down my shift key with family selected and my line, I'm going to go ahead and place my text on that curve. I'm going to click apply, and some of the settings that it had before have been remembered, so that's great. Let's just go ahead and change the height of this a little bit. Oh, sorry, to make it a little bit better. It's probably good. Let's zoom out and just make sure that we're look the same. Yeah, that's pretty good. And we're going to hit close, and then we're going to go ahead again and off select or unselect what I have selected. Going to select the family text and go ahead and fix the spacing. Again, holding down the shift key while I click between the letters to pull them apart a bit. I think that looks great. So let's go ahead and go back to our pick tool. So now we have our layout pretty much done the way we'd like to have it. Now let's go ahead and do some very basic tooling for this. Important note, if you plan to create tooling and run it on your CNC, make sure that you use values for the material setup and for the parameters of each toolpath that are safe and appropriate for your CNC machine, the tooling you have available, and whatever material you are planning to use for your project. Okay, to start off with, we're going to go over and open up our Toolpaths tab, and we're going to pin that in place so it doesn't go back into the side of your screen. We're going to hover over our 2D view, and we're going to press F on the keyboard, and that way we'll focus in on our whole project again. And we're going to start off by setting up our material. So we're going to click that, and As we set up at the beginning, our material thickness is 0.75, our datum is set to the center, and our model position is at the bottom of the block. It may also be at the top of the block, but in either case, it takes up our full block, which would be okay if we were sure that the top of our block was flat, but we're not, I'm sure, unless you've planed it ahead of time. So what we're going to do, just to be sure that we don't have any wobbling or any weird angles on the top rim here, we're going to go ahead and use this new feature here, which is set thickness. So we're going to go ahead and hit set, and we're going to change that to be 0.74. So that will reduce the size of our whole layout by 0.01 of an inch. And we're going to press apply. And we're going to close that down. And you'll see that in our little representation here of our material that there's a dark area at the top. And that's the extra material. That's the extra 0.1. And so we're going to make sure the gap is above the model, which it is. And that looks great. So we're going to click OK. Now, we are going to need to have one line, one vector to use for a profile cut. So I may as well go ahead and get that right now. So we're going to select any of the objects that make up the outside border of our layout. And in this case, there's just one that we can use. So we're going to select that, and we're going to go ahead and click Create Vector Boundary from Selected Component. So we're going to click that. Now, what VCarve Pro has done is it's created a outline vector, but also it's created an outline vector on the inside of that, because if you remember back at the first of this video, this trivet has a hole in the middle. So what we need to do is we need to ungroup these two lines. So we're going to go ahead and hover over top of the inside line or the outside line, doesn't matter which one, right click and go ungroup objects back onto the original layers, and then off click anywhere on the page. And we're going to select the center circle, and we're going to press delete, because all we really need is just this outside vector to use as a profile cut. So let's start off by doing our roughing pass. So for our roughing pass, we're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. We're going to go ahead and use this vector that we created as our outline, and we're going to have an offset boundary of half of the tool diameter. And that's just so that we don't end up going off the edge of our layout too far and going right down to our spoil board. So we're going to leave that there at 0.125. We're going to have a machining allowance of 0.04. We're going to use, let's use 3D raster, and we're going to go ahead and calculate that. VCarve Pro is going to work its magic, and then we can have a look and preview that toolpath. And as always, when you preview your toolpath, you should preview each and every one. If it doesn't look like what you expect, then you should go back and figure out why. And that looks like exactly what I expect it would look like. Let's go ahead and close that down. Let's go ahead to our finishing pass. We're going to use a 1/8 inch ball nose end mill. We're going to use the selected vector. If we go back to our 2D view, that vector is still selected, so we can select that. We're going to have an offset boundary of 0. That way, when it comes down and does its finishing pass, it's going to stop right at this very edge. It's not going to fall off the edge. And we're going to use an offset machining strategy, which is going to start from the center and slowly work itself all the way out until it hits the vector that we've defined. And we can go ahead and calculate that. And again, VCarve Pro is going to work some magic and hopefully give us a toolpath that we're expecting. Perfect. Let's preview the visible toolpath, and we'll see that it cleans up quite nicely and it stops right at the edge like we expected. So that's perfect. So let's close that down. The next toolpath we'll do is the V-carving. So we're going to go ahead and back to our 2D view, and we need to select the text that we're going to use the V-carve, holding down our Shift key. Going to choose to select a V-carve or engraving toolpath. We're not going to worry about our start depth or our flat bottom depth, because we're actually going to project our toolpath onto our 3D model. So we're going to make sure that we have our right V-bit tool selected, and a 90 degree bit is fine. And we are going to go ahead and project that onto our 3D model, and we're going to calculate that. Then we're going to go ahead and preview that visible toolpath. And there we have it. Family and friends is on there perfectly. Great. So let's close that down. And now we're going to do our profile cut, which we're going to use that outside vector again. And we're going to use our end mill to machine it out of the actual block of material we have. We are going to leave behind some tabs because most people don't have a vacuum table. Now, of course, if you've double-sided taped your project to your table, then you may not need these, but it is always good to do a profile cut to get this out of here cleanly. So we're going to go back to our 2D view, and we're going to select our profile vector that we created. We're going to create a 2D profile toolpath. Our start depth is going to be at 0, and we're going to go down all the way to through all of our material. So that's 0.75. Rule of thumb is if these two numbers don't add up to the thickness of your material, then there's something wrong. Now, we could, if we wanted to, because our first toolpath actually when we did our finishing toolpath, we did remove some of the material. So a couple of these passes of this profile cut are going to be in the air and not remove any material. But we may as well do it this way. That way we're sure it's going to be work and do the right job and us not break any bits. We're going to use an end mill outside of that vector that we've chosen, and we're going to go ahead and add in some tabs. So let's go to our 2D view. Press F on the keyboard to center that back in the center of our screen. We're going to edit our tabs. Now for this job, I think 4 tabs is going to be fine, but you may, depending on how big this is, you might want to have more. So we'll add in our tabs, and VCarve Desktop will figure out where those should be, and they seem to be in pretty reasonable spots. Hit close, and now we just want to make sure that the length of these are fine, and they look pretty good to me for right now. We can always change it in a minute if we're not happy with that, but we'll take a peek. We'll calculate that, and if we turn this up, you'll see in the wireframe that there is actually a tab there going to be left behind, and you'll see that if we move it up on its edge that there's going to be 2 passes that are just going to spin around in the air, but that's okay. It'll clean up the edge, and it'll just be sure that we don't, when we plunge into our material, we're not going to break our bit or bind up our machine. So let's just go ahead and preview that visible toolpath. There we have it with our tabs in place. And that looks okay, I think. Now those tabs might be a little bit, not quite wide enough, but maybe we could go back and fix. So let's do that. So let's undo our last toolpath preview. Let's bring up our profile pass. Let's go ahead and make these maybe 1/2 inch. Let's recalculate that toolpath. Let's preview that visible toolpath again. Oh, they look much better now. And I think we're pretty happy with that.